Well, the far-right AfD finished second in Germany's federal election, as predicted by pre-election polls. But what did come as a surprise was where in Germany the far-right party was able to gain its support. We go now to the western part of Germany, next to Gelsenkirchen, a town and a region built on coal mining that the Social Democrats used to call their stronghold. Not anymore. DW's Anja Koch reports on a radically changed political landscape.
Reinhold Adam visits his old coal mine in Gelsenkirchen. He was a miner and a social democrat for more than 25 years. He's shocked that the far-right AfD has become the strongest political force here.
There was so much solidarity. The strength of the coal field is solidarity, and underground solidarity was vital.
That was when there was still work in the working-class town of Gelsenkirchen, and when voting for the SPD was normal. In 1998, the SPD still received up to 60% of the vote here. It was the party for blue-collar workers. But the last coal mine in Gelsenkirchen closed soon afterwards. Today, the unemployment rate here is the highest in Germany. Wages are low, and the SPD secured only around 24% in the federal elections.
The structural upheavals here in the Ruhr region, most of which have not been compensated for, have led to massive job losses and made our city poorer. Even a Social Democrat-led federal government has honestly not taken the measures people here on the ground say will solve our problems.
They are the ones benefiting, members of the far-right Alternative for Germany. The party secured almost a quarter of the vote here. That also surprised us, to be honest. It clearly shows that there's a fear of social decline within society. The AfD advocates cutting social benefits, closing Germany's borders and deporting refugees. Policies that convinced many voters but frightened others. They're acting like right-wing populists. That's the problem. They have no plan for how they want to implement all these things.
I think it's important to stand together in these difficult times and look for solutions instead of spreading right-wing agitation in this country. Germany and the coal town of Gelsenkirchen simply don't need that.
Reinhold Adam knows that Gelsenkirchen as a coal mining town doesn't exist anymore. But he wants to remember its spirit. He's counting on that even in the crisis. Voting for the far right never crossed his mind.
Let's speak to our political correspondent, Simon Young, for more. Simon, Germany's Social Democrats, they see themselves as the party of the working class, but it looks like many voters don't agree with that anymore. Why are blue-collar voters flocking to the AfD?
Yeah, the short answer, I think, is that the AfD is a protest party. There's a massive sense of frustration among many voters with the previous government under Olaf Scholz. The three parties, the Social Democrats, the Greens and the Free Democrats, promised modernisation of the economy, digitalisation and all sorts of other sort of shiny policies. That promise doesn't seem to have been kept, and many people, ordinary working people, if you like, are not feeling that. In fact, they feel a lot poorer than they did before. So
is that fair, though? The SPD's been in coalition, as you say, with other parties. Have they gone wrong in seeing their core voters deserting them, or was it the government to blame as a whole?
Well, clearly there was a lot of internal disputes between the three parties. The SPD and Greens followed a more sort of left agenda, if you like. The Free Democrats saw themselves as the guardians of fiscal rectitude, and that's what ultimately tore the coalition apart. But the economy is just one part of this. I also wanted to mention migration, of course. Most of the parties agree that something needs to be done to curb, in particular, irregular migration into Germany. But while they're thinking about it, the problems continue. Local authorities are under strain. And then we saw those terrible attacks during the campaign, many of them involving foreigners, where some of them were, failed asylum seekers and so on. So the AFD is the party that says stridently, we've got the policies to deal with these issues. We can turn these things around. And many voters, I think, were drawn to that, either because they really believe in it or because they wanted to send a message of protest to the government parties.
And when you look at the AFD's policies, how much do they actually benefit the working class?
Well, that's interesting. The AfD says it knows how to make Germany rich again. And, for instance, one of their big promises to halve income tax. That's obviously appealing to many voters. But, in fact, according to a study done by one of Germany's leading economic research institutes, their policies, if implemented, would actually benefit those on higher incomes. And then there's the point more widely in the economy, their plans for energy, pull down wind farms, fire up fossil fuel power creation, even nuclear. Well, all of that is rolling back a lot of the work done in recent decades. And then massively reduce immigration. Again, well, even including some of the immigration that German industry say it needs. Leaving the euro, leaving the EU even, most economists agree plans like those that are coming from the AfD, well, they wouldn't benefit the economy, they wouldn't create jobs, and so they wouldn't really help working people.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much. As always, that's our political correspondent, Simon Young.